you ever wondered what instruments do the greatest violinists play on? In this episode, we are going to discover legendary instruments that have been with some of the most influential players of history, from Jascha Heifetz to Hilary Hahn. Each of these instruments have a fascinating story that in many ways have transformed the way we have lived and understand music. Welcome to my channel. My name is Melisma Violin. I am violinist and specialist in string instruments and bows. In my channel, you can find everything related with string instruments, like practical luthier tips, fascinating stories about violin and bow makers, violin auctions, what's happening in the market, and some nice tools that will help you shape your sound. If that sounds interesting, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. Violinist number 1, Jascha Heifetz. But right before we dive in, I want to share something very valuable with you. As a violinist, educator, and string instruments and bow specialist with over 10 years of experience, I am very excited to announce my consultant services. If you are in the market right now looking to buy an instrument or bow, but you're a bit confused about where you should buy your instrument, how much you can spend, what type of instrument really suits your budget and your artistic vision, that's what I'm here for. In our personalized consultation, I will guide you step by step so you can make the best decision possible, taking care of your time and money. You can schedule directly from my website, melismaviolin.com. Schedule today. So now let's get started with the story and the violins of Jascha Heifetz. Legendary violinist Jascha Heifetz was born in Vilnius, Lithuania in 1901 and was recognized as a child prodigy very early on. He studied in St. Petersburg under the legendary Leopold Auer and debuted with the Berlin Philharmonic at age 11. After the Russian Revolution, he immigrated to the United States and at age 16 made his iconic debut at Carnegie Hall. His technique was unmatched, cold, precise, and elegant. Even David Oistrakh called him a superhuman phenomenon. In January of 1922, with the Piel family business in trouble, Heifetz had the opportunity to purchase the Stradivari he had been borrowing. Today, this Strad is known as the Heifetz Piel Stradivarius and is actually now listed for private sale in Teresio. Later that same year, he acquired a 1740 Guarneri del Gesù, once belonged to violinist Ferdinand David. And I personally think it's very impressive for a violinist to be able to afford and buy two amazing, fine Italian violins in the same year. For the next 3 decades, arguably the most important of his career, Heifetz traveled with his double violin case. You can see him pretty fancy, pretty elegant, getting out of his private plane, traveling the world with his two fine Italian violins. That's a vibe. He was using both the 1731 Strad and the 1740 Guarneri that he interchanged between his concerts and recordings. By 1947, he had logged over 2 million travel miles, making these likely the most traveled instruments of the 20th century. One of his most famous violin is the Dolphin Strad of 1714, which he purchased in 1951, 30 years after he acquired the Piel Strad, and which now is in hands of Ray Chen on loan from the Nippon Foundation. In fact, I had a chance to listen to this instrument live to a Carnegie Hall concert where Ray Chen performed Mendelssohn Violin Concerto. And I can honestly say that this instrument blew all my expectations because, as you can see, I was sitting really high up, almost on the ceiling, and the instrument could project even where I was, and he can sound above the entire orchestra. So it is completely true that the mystic behind these Strads are real. They are superb instruments. And just in case you doubt that, don't forget to listen to one of your favorite violinists play live so you can experience that sound for yourself. Going to live concerts is such an unmatchable experience. Don't forget to go to live concerts. Heifetz also played a tononi and several modern violins. It's also truly impressive to think that Antonio Stradivari was around 87 years old when he built the Heifetz Piel, one of his most celebrated violins. If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to like, comment, share with a musician friend, and if you're listening from Spotify, follow me and add it to your library. It's a free way to support my work. Violinist number 2, Yehudi Menuhin. And also a little mention about Isaac Perlman, but you will realize what I'm talking about later on. Yehudi Menuhin, recognized as a prodigy from age 7, Yehudi Menuhin debuted with the San Francisco Symphony and quickly launched an international career. Born in New York, he studied in Paris with George Enescu and in Basel with Adolf Busch. Throughout his life, he played in the world's greatest concert halls, but also gave performances for Allied soldiers during the World War II and for the Holocaust survivors in 1945. In 1947, he performed an historical concert with the Berlin Philharmonic as a gesture of reconciliation because of his Jewish-Lithuanian background. And Yehudi Menuhin also was very well known for stepping out of the boundaries of classical music, and you can see him performing all kinds of different genres like jazz with Stefan Grappelli, and also this iconic performance with Ravi Shankar. His relationship with instruments was deep and extensive. In 1928, he received the Prince Kevin Hullerstrad of 1733, purchased for him by businessman Goldman. In 1935, Ennemi Français made a copy so good that critics couldn't tell the difference on stage. Quite impressive, Ennemi Français. During the war, he used the copy instead of the original for safety reasons, and sometimes he performed with a Guarneri loaned by Hill and Sons. In the 1950s, Menuhin bought the Soil Estrade of 1714. Built by Stradivari at age 70, the violin had once belonged to Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume, one of the greatest French luthiers of the 19th century, and I will also do a special mention about Vuillaume later on in the video, so stay tuned to figure out what's going on with Vuillaume. Menuhin preferred its power over the sweetness of the Kevin Huller and used it for many of his orchestral performances. His relationship with the Guarneri family was just as rich. He played the Isaïe that will later be owned by Isaac Stern, and we will specifically be discussing this instrument, the Count Eville and finally the Lord Wilton, which he bought in the 70s and considered it perfect for music like the Brahms Violin Concerto. In Menuhin's words, "I was wedded to the Strads, but had illicit affairs with the Guarneri. They were wild and earthly." And I think this quote is so accurate because so many people say, and I agree, that the Strads are very aesthetic and of course have a powerful sound, but the Guarneri violins are more wild. They're not visually so perfectly made, and they have, in an equal sense, the same personality and sound as their looks. He also collected violins by Grancino, Bussetto, modern makers like Spidlin, Poggi, and Glenn Collins, as well as some very fine bows. Eventually, the Soil was sold to Isaac Perlman. That's what I was talking about. He's important in this story as well, who still plays it. In a String magazine interview, Perlman said, "When Menuhin let me try it, I felt it was the greatest sound I have ever experienced. and it was my dream to own it. And one day, that dream came true. You can watch the interview on YouTube. Moving on to violinist number 3, Isaac Stern with his Guarneri del Gesù of 1740. Isaac Stern wasn't just a violin virtuoso, he was a tireless advocate for the arts in the United States. Born in Ukraine and raised in San Francisco, he played a key role in saving the Carnegie Hall from demolition in the 1960s, and was also the main driving forces behind many of the great American musicians in the 20th century. On stage, his style was marked by a rich tone, generous musicality, and a palpable emotional commitment. The instrument that he played on during a large part of his career was the 1740 Guarneri del Gesù Isai, named after the legendary violin virtuoso and composer Eugene Isai. This Guarneri has a dark, powerful sound, quite different from the brightness of the Strats. After Stern passing away in 2001, the violin was auctioned by Teresio and reached a record price close to $4 million. Today, it's considered one of the most desirable Del Gesù violins in the world. When I went to Carnegie Hall the first time, I remember wondering why was the main hall called Isaac Stern. And now that I was doing this research for this video, I realized how important he was in the story of Carnegie Hall, establishing it as an artistic institution. And he was also president of the foundation for 40 years. So, bravo, Isaac Stern. We wouldn't have all the concerts we have nowadays in Carnegie Hall if it wasn't for him. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Did you already know any of the stories I'm talking about? Does knowing the stories behind those instruments and the performers make you admire them a bit more? Because definitely I do. Violinist number 4, Joshua Bell. Joshua Bell is one of today's most acclaimed and popular violinists. Born in the US in 1967, he made his debut as a soloist at age 14 with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and since then has built a brilliant career as a soloist, conductor, and ambassador of classical music in both traditional and unconventional spaces. He has recorded over 40 albums, won a Grammy Award, widely known for his performance of the soundtrack The Red Violin. And if you haven't watched this movie, I highly recommend that you do. It's actually quite related with what we're talking about because it's a story of a violin in all his adventures and performers that go with him during his story. So, watch the movie. Joshua Bell is also at the heart of one of the most fascinating stories in the violin world. His violin, the Gibson X Huberman Strad of 1713, was stolen from Carnegie Hall in a dressing room in 1936, while Bronislaw Huberman was on stage playing a different instrument. And this is quite a fascinating story, and I will be doing a full podcast about this story because actually it's kind of funny how everything ended up in it, how the person managed to steal the violin. So stay tuned for that. In 2001, shortly after the violin resurfaced nearly 60 years after the theft, Joshua Bell tried it and fell in love instantly. He sold his previous Strad and managed to acquire the Gibson X Huberman for around $4 million. Since then, it has become his voice on stage and in recordings. It's not just about sound, it's actually a story about loss, redemption, and destiny. And last, but certainly not least, violinist number 5, Hilary Hahn. Hahn is one of the most beloved, respected, and consistent soloists in today's classical music scene. Born in 1979, she made her orchestral debut at age 11. By 16, she was already recording Dutch gramophone, and since then, she has built an impeccable career, combining technical virtuosity with deep artistry and a genuine connection with her audience. She is also known with her close relationship with fans through social media, like her challenge of 100 days of practice, her collaborations with living composers. Unlike most of her peers, Hilary Hahn doesn't play a Strad or a Guarneri. She plays not one, but two violins by Jean-Baptiste Bijon, who I mentioned earlier in this episode. One is from 1864. It's modeled after a Guarneri, and another from 1865, inspired by the 1715 Allard Stradivari, which belonged to Bijon's son-in-law, Delphin Allard. These violins represent the best of the 19th century French violin making school. And in their finest examples, Bijon violins can sound just as good as the Cremonese originals, but at a much more accessible price range. Hilary purchased an 1865 Bijon after seeing it at Sotheby's auction. While it didn't sound particularly spectacular at first, she felt an instinctive connection with the instrument and saw great potential in it. And with a few adjustments and the right bow, the violin became her primary companion, allowing her to let go of the emotional weight of playing always the same violin since her teenage years. She now says that the 65 Bijon feels like an extension of her body, agile, powerful, and responsive to the smallest nuances. She says that the relationship between a performer and their instrument can be as complex and deep as a human relationship. What do you think about that? I would love to read you in the comments. Well, each of the violins of today are witnesses to historical concerts and recordings and moments that have shaped the course of classical music in the last century. I hope you enjoyed very much this podcast, and I hope to see you in the next episodes. Thank you very much for being here. Love you all. Bye.